Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. The Killer Women Vodcast is pleased to be a part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. To learn more about Danielle and her books, visit her at www.daniellegirard.com, and to access all of our vodcasts, go to youtube.com/Authors on the Air. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello and welcome to Killer Women. I am your host, Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Audra McElyea. Audra loves to write suspenseful stories that read like a modern-day Alfred Hitchcock film. She's a former corporate buyer, magazine writer, University of Tennessee Head Majorette, and personal trainer who has always loved to tell a story. Whether it be through the movies she wrote and made her friends act out growing up, the secret songs she wrote and never showed a soul, or through the choreography she wrote for numerous dance and baton twirling teams. Audra has a bachelor's degree from the University of Tennessee in Consumer Services Management. She currently lives in Tennessee with her husband, 2 boys, and their dog and cat. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, exercising, and listening to Taylor Swift songs over and over. Audra is a proud member of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, International Thriller Writers, and the Ink Tank. Her work has appeared in a national online publication, including She Knows magazine. One Little Word, which was released February 22nd, just a few days ago, is her first novel. So first reviews of One Little Word call it compelling, packed with sharp turns and unexpected twists, and I'd have to agree. I'm not easily surprised by a twist, but I can honestly say I did not see that one coming. So Audra, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we dig into all the fun stuff about where this idea came from and your writing and how you got started, can you give our readers, our listeners, our watchers, a little summary about One Little Word?
Well, it's set in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's about a famous suspense author who is a native Knoxvillian who everybody just kind of adores, kind of like we all adore Peyton Manning and Dolly Parton here. So it's a very famous author, and she is killed. And there's rumors that it could be, foul play. Maybe she was murdered, but nobody knows for sure. And there's an investigation going on. So our main character is Madeline, and she is a reporter / journalist who has a Me Too moment at the very beginning of the book, and then she goes out on her own because she doesn't want to work for her boss anymore at the news station downtown. And she's trying to figure out this story because the police aren't taking it seriously. And so she's trying to figure out this story, and she's out on her own, and she gets tips from a source who seems to know a bit about what happened, and they're kind of leading her through this investigation. And that's probably about all I can say. We don't really know if a source is good or bad, and things get crazy.
They do indeed get crazy. So before we talk a little bit more about One Little Word, which for sure was a twisty Hitchcockian story that I really enjoyed. I think it's, since this is your first book and you're obviously a young author, many of our listeners, I think, are aspiring authors themselves. So can you tell us a little bit about the process? Was this the first book you've ever written? Are there books buried in the backyard, which is what I always say about my first books? Can you give us a little bit about that information and what it was like to find an agent and publisher? Because I think that's really helpful for people who are trying to do what you've done.
Right. Well, I started my writing journey about 10 years ago, so it was definitely not a quick one. And this is not my first book. This is my first book to be published, but I have one buried in the backyard. I say stuffed in a drawer and locked up forever. Yeah. But that's the one I wrote first and really learned all the do's and don'ts, what to do, what not to do, all of that. And, I started that in 2012 when I was in between jobs and we had moved around a lot for my husband's job. And then I didn't finish it until 2016. I wrote about half of it in 2012, and then I finished the other half in 2016 when I was on bed rest with my second child. And then I queried and all that. And I feel like at that time, things were a little bit different in the querying world. I feel like it's very rare now to get feedback from agents. You usually just get a line or two, if even that. But I was very fortunate to get some really good feedback. And I even had one who said, I think you have potential. This reads like a first book, and encouraged me to move on, or, really work on it a lot more. But I had already worked on it for years at that point. So,
Right.
moving on from the first book was probably the biggest challenge, because you're so married to it. You've devoted so much time and energy into it. I feel like I had to kind of go to school for years to be a writer, because there is no school that I had. I didn't go to college and major in English or journalism
Right.
or anything having to do remotely to
Right.
writing. So I kind of had to self-teach, and luckily I found Women's Fiction Writers Association. I got plugged in with some great mentors who, really helped me out, who really didn't have to help me out, and kind of coached me through some things. And eventually I moved on, wrote One Little Word, and that's a little bit of a different story. If you want me to go there, I don't know if you want me to go there yet, but the writing of One Little Word was really a strange story.
Well, I mean, as much as you can, because we know that there is a really big twist we don't want to give away. But yeah, tell us about that. I mean, I think one thing that you mentioned that I think is important for aspiring writers is that you do kind of have to walk away from a first book. Oftentimes, I think it's maybe rare to publish your very first ever novel, unless you've like you said, sort of shredded it and rewritten it. So tell us about, what it was like after you sort of, were sad and moved away from the first book you'd ever written and sort of dug into One Little Word. What was that experience like?
Well, the process of getting to the point of being ready to move on was the hardest part, like I said. But this book, I've written 4 books, all in all. But this one was just crazy, because I dreamed the whole thing as a movie, and it totally played out from beginning to end. The plot was just there. It was starring Johnny Depp, and I switched him to a female and filled in the blanks and subplots, and then that was that. I wrote it in a month, because I couldn't wait to get it out.
Wow. Well, that is amazing, and I would say rare from my experience. And then it just made me realize I haven't shown the beautiful cover of this yet, so I wanted to show everybody what One Little Word looks like. And there is your Johnny Depp stand-in.
Yeah, I've got one here,
Madeline. Oh, it's beautiful. So and then from there, what was the revision process like? Was there, or did you create it in a month and it was ready to go?
No.
Don't tell us that, because I don't want to hear that. I'm just kidding.
No. I wrote it in a month. That was the first draft. So I got it all out, and then, it took months to edit it. The editing is the worst part for me. I have fun getting the first draft out of my head and down, but the editing, oh man. Yeah, there was a lot of editing to do.
Right. And somebody once said to me, a book is 1%, 10% writing and 90% rewriting or something. And I was like, great. That's it's about true though, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so your protagonist, Madeline Barton, is also a writer. She's a journalist, to be specific, and not necessarily an investigator. So what were the challenges, do you think, of having, I don't know what if your first book had a sort of proper investigator, but Madeline has to learn some things about sort of the investigation world, and she doesn't have a willing participant. The local law enforcement is not interested in helping her. So what were the challenges for her to learn how to be an investigator?
Well, I think with any kind of whodunit, you got to have an investigator of some sort, or a police officer, or something to carry along the investigation and the story. So you're trying to figure out who done it. And for me, I didn't want to just do like a police procedural. I wanted to do something that felt a little more personal. So the aspect that Allegra and Madeline had met and had some things that kind of bonded them together in the past.
Right.
Kind of made it feel a little more personal than just your typical police procedural. And so that was important to me. I wanted to have, a really deep dive into Allegra's life. And, even though she's not technically the main character, she is a main character, even though all of her stuff is in the past. So, from the get-go that she's not going to be around. But it's important to have that connection with her. So I wanted to have Madeline, really be the one to lead us toward what really happened.
And you're right. I mean, that Madeline she really looked up to Allegra. So that was she really respected her, and they did have sort of a personal connection. So that's a really fair point. And I agree with you that making that personal connection is super important. So, okay, so let's go and talk about the source. Cause one of the things, one of the things that is, this kind of plot device is in your case worked out really well, but can feel kind of contrived, right? We're like, all of a sudden we're getting these like wonderful, like little tidbits from an anonymous source who seems to sort of be on the inside of the case. And I want to know, like, and I don't know how we can even talk about it. But I guess I would like to sort of, did that come to you sort of it was a dream. So in the dream, or did you have to sort of figure out how this information, how she would be led through this case? Or did you know that really from the beginning, like this is what's going to happen, is that she's going to receive information from this source?
Yeah, I knew that from the beginning. That was in the dream. So I didn't really have much to think about there.
I want to have your dreams. Okay,
I know. I tried to do it for my next book and it didn't work out. So I had to actually work on it.
God, I tell you, and I think that idea that it was so cinematographic probably also made it even that much more interesting to write. So tell us about sort of what, you mentioned Hitchcock, I think a few times, in the things that you sort of love. So are there specific Hitchcock books that inspired you? Are there other authors you find inspiring?
Oh gosh, there's so many. As far as other authors, Kimberly Bell, love her. And yes. She actually read an early version and was helping me, edit some things and gave some suggestions. And she actually suggested that Madeline and Allegra meet in the beginning and find out that they share a birthday and that kind of bonds them. And they have this moment where, they kind of connect. So definitely her. And I love every single one of her books. They're just all amazing. They never fail to drop my jaw at the end.
Yes, she's one.
So
and she
definitely
was just recently
her.
a guest. Yes.
And Ruth Ware, Riley Sager. I never know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, Sager, right.
And The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is my absolute favorite book ever. So
that was a wonderful book. I agree.
That you have to be committed and study it a little bit, but
yes.
it's mind blowing. So I
really
love that.
Did you read his next one?
I haven't yet. No.
It's also really, really good.
Really?
Yeah. The next one's really good too. I listened to the next one.
I like one that's a little bit difficult. You have to think about.
Yes. Well, I think that's true. I think you've accomplished that as well. I mean, there is a moment in this book where you as a reader, you are like, put on the brakes and like you have to stop and think about sort of like the world that you've been in, and that's and the clues are there. So that's actually that's when you feel like, if the clues aren't there, you're like, what is going on? But when the clues are there, you're like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've had a lot of people say they went back and flipped through and were like, oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
So,
no, it's totally fair.
That's all I can say.
I know. It's one of those.
But Vertigo was definitely an influence in this book. It's my favorite Hitchcock film, and I love it. It's flawless, and I had to throw in some nods to it in there.
Yep, I picked up on those for sure.
Love it.
So I wish there's more. It's so funny. It's one of those books where we can only talk about it to a very sort of specific point, and then we can't talk about it anymore. And I don't want to, So I don't want to.
It's a tough one to talk about
It
for sure.
is. It is a
Because
tough one.
it's really like there's 3 twists in it. There's the big
Yeah.
one, and then there's 2 other ones. So it's
But we
really
can't talk
hard.
about. Yeah, we can't talk about any of them. We
Nope.
can't talk about any of them.
You just have to get in there and read it.
You just have to trust us, right? Exactly.
Right.
So okay, so and it's what a wonderful story, and congratulations on getting it out there in the
Thank you.
world, and it's out right now, so it's available to be snapped up. So tell us, Audra, what is next? What are you working on right now? When might we see it?
I have a book called Counterplay that's coming out hopefully in 2023. So I have a 2-book deal with my current publisher, so they're going to put it out in about a year. And then I have another one that I wrote, and it's called Hush Dear Sister. And then I have another one that I've kind of plotted out in my head that's called Good People. And then I have another one in my head that I've kind of plotted out on my phone, and honestly can't remember what I ended up naming it, but
Tell us.
I can't stop.
I love it. That's what readers want. They always want the next book. So can you give us a little taste or sort of idea about what Counterplay? That sounds like the next book that'll be out. What that one's about?
I call that one a mix of You, Gone Girl, and Dear Wife. So it's a little darker.
Yeah.
A little bit more sinister than One Little War, but still the same mind-blowing twists.
I love it. I love it.
The characters are just a little darker.
Yes. Well, I know we love dark. I think that's what many of us to gravitate towards that. For whatever reason, we don't need to dig too deeply into. I
think when times are tough, and obviously the last couple of years have been tough one for everyone, you either go to a fluff book to make yourself feel better, or you go to a dark book to be like, well, at least I'm not going through this.
Right.
And that's where I go.
I go both. I tend to go back and forth. I like to watch fluff television, but I do love a dark book. So
I'll watch I Love Lucy and then go read a dark thriller. So.
Yes, there you go. No, that doesn't seem weird to me at all. Okay, well, tell readers where they can find you, your website, and then also where are your favorite social media places, and then we'll leave them to go find your book.
I'm pretty much on all the social media.
Okay.
I don't do Snapchat. That's about it. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, everything.
Under at Audra.
It's a little bit different for each one. Most of the time I do get Audra McElyea because it's such a unique name.
Yes.
But if you go to my Instagram and click the link in my bio, it'll link you everywhere. Or if you go to audramcelyea.com, I have links to all my social.
And I'm gonna spell it. It's on everything we're seeing, but just because some people might be listening, it's Audra is Audra and McElyea is McElyea. Because I had to go through how do I say this out loud and not mess it up? It's a beautiful name. Is it Scottish?
It's Scotch-Irish, yeah.
Scotch-Irish. Okay, well, it's gorgeous. So, well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. You got to meet Audra McElyea and hear only a little bit about One Little Word, because we couldn't destroy the incredible twist for you. So go pick that up now and keep your eyes posted for Audra's next book. Thank you so much for joining us today on Killer Women, a part of the Authors on the Air Global Network, and we will see you next time. Bye.